Okay, we are asked to convert the given polar coordinates to rectangular coordinates. And so the first one is 3, negative 2 pi over 3. So they ask me to find rectangular. That's what I'm trying to find. And I know rectangle coordinates look like xy. So I'm going to use those xy formulas. X is equal to r cosine theta, and y is equal to r sine theta. And so we would just say this is going to convert to, it'll be x is equal to, remember that this is r and this is theta, so x would be equal to 3 times the cosine of negative 2 pi over 3, and y would be equal to 3 times the sine of negative 2 pi over 3. I believe your test kind of wants you to do it without using your calculator, but you'll have access to your calculator, so I'm going to kind of show you both ways. Negative 2 pi over 3 is the same as negative 4 pi over 6, so it goes negative pi over 6, negative 2 pi over 6, negative 3 pi over 6, negative 4 pi over 6. So right here, the coordinate right here is over 1/2 and down square root of 3 over 2. Okay? So in this case, for x, it would be 3 times negative 1/2, or negative 3/2, and 3 times the sine of negative 2 pi over 3 would be 3 times negative 3 pi over 2, which would be negative 3 root 3 over 2. So they're going to write the answer to this as negative 3/2 and negative 3 root 3 over 2. Now, what would happen if we chose to do this on our calculator? We would make sure that our mode was in radians, because 2 pi over 3 is a radian measure. So I switch it over like that. And then I'm just going to type this in. I'm going to say 3 times cosine of negative 2 pi over 3, 3 times the cosine of negative 2 pi over 3, and it gives me negative 1.5. You notice that's the same as negative 3/2. And then to find the y-coordinate, I go 3 times the sine of negative 2 pi divided by 3, and I get negative 2.59 right here. So if I was trying to match this up and I did not want to think about the unit circle, I could just figure out decimally. I already know that's a negative 1.5. And then I could just double check. Negative 3 square root of 3 divided by 2 does indeed come out to be negative 2.598, just like our original answer did right there. So that would be how we do that one. We do the next one just the same way. We would say x is equal to 4 times the sine of 5 pi over 6, and y is equal to, sorry, this is cosine. Cosine. Y is equal to 4 times the sine of 5 pi over 6. Right? Because x goes with cosine, y goes with sine. Sorry, a little typographical error there. All right, 5 pi over 6. Where is that? 5 pi over 6 lives in the second quadrant right over here. So you go over square root of 3 over 2 and up 1/2. Okay? So it would be 4 times cosine, which would be negative square root of 3 over 2. So that would be negative 2 root 3. And the y part would be 4 times the sine, and I believe that's positive 1/2. So it would just come out to be 2. So your answer, and this is what it'll look like as an answer choice, is negative 2 root 3, comma 2. If we did it on our calculator, which I know some of you that's your favorite way, and you might always want to go check it anyway, 4 times cosine of 5 pi divided by 6 is negative 3.4, and let's just see what negative 2 root 3 is as a decimal. Oh yay, negative 3.46. So we would recognize that's the same thing. And then 4 times sine of 5 pi over 6. 4 times the sine of 5 pi divided by 6. And I get 2, just like we got 2 here. So you can do it on your calculator. All right, next, how do we go from rectangular to polar? Remember, polar is r theta, and what they're giving me is xy. So they give me xy, and I need to convert it to r theta. So I need to remember that r is equal to square root of x squared plus y squared, and tangent of theta is equal to y over x. Those are the conversions that I need to remember. All right, so to start with, when we convert, we would say r is equal to the square root of negative 3 squared plus 0 squared, which would just actually be equal to square root of 9, which is 3. So the radius is 3. And tangent of theta is equal to y over x, so 0 over negative 3. If you did this on your calculator, you could say second tangent of 0, because 0 over negative 3 is 0, and you'll get that it's equal to 0 degrees. Now, when you're finding the angle here, it comes out wrong approximately 1/2 of the time. So first thing you need to do actually is we should have just sketched what this looks like. Negative 3, 0 would look like right there. So quite frankly, even without doing anything on your calculator, without even thinking of unit circle, where would that be? It's got a radius of 3, that seems obvious. And if they wanted it in radian measure, I think we would call that pi. If they wanted it in degree measures, we would call it 180 degrees, because that's what that is over there. When we start here, 0, 90, 180, 270, 360, like that. So quite frankly, if they lie on one of the quadrants, if one of the coordinates is 0, you actually don't even have to use those formulas. And as a matter of fact, they said it was 0, which was exactly half the circle wrong. So you always need to plot the points. All right, so keeping that in mind, let's see if we could figure out what quadrant we're supposed to be in here on this one. It says go over 80, down 20. So I'm going to assume I'm going to go over 80, down 20. So I'm going to be somewhere over here in the 4th quadrant. Okay, so r is equal to the square root of 80 squared plus negative 20 squared. And you just do that on your calculator, not really a big deal. Square root of 80 squared plus 20 squared. It doesn't really matter that it's negative because it would come out to be positive anyway. And so I get that it is 82.46. That's what our r is. And I know that the tangent of theta is equal to y over x, so negative 20 over 80. You could reduce it, or you could just type it in that way. It's okay. Now, if you want your answer, I think I would rather my answer come out in degrees anyway. I'm going to go up one here and go over. I'm going to have my answer give it to me in degrees. I'm going to ask for degrees. Okay, so I'm going to go second tangent, negative 20 divided by 80. And it tells me that theta is equal to negative 14.036 degrees. So for my answer, it would be r is 82.46, and my angle is negative 14. They might even just say negative 14 degrees because 0.036 is pretty small. And that looks like negative 14 could be right there, so I would say that that's a good angle. And that's converting from polar to rectangular and from rectangular to polar.